Peace and blessings, people. Welcome back to the channel once again. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that is not only near and dear to my heart, because that's how my healing journey started, but it's also very important to billions of people out there in the world because it is the number one risk factor for the number one cause of human death. Okay, that being cardiovascular disease. And that number one risk factor is high blood pressure. If you don't have it, you know somebody who has it. And the statistics show that if you don't have it now, a large majority of people are going to develop it. And so it's very near and dear to me. So I know it's very near and dear to you as well. If not for you, for somebody you love. Now, if you're a current subscriber, thank you so much for your support. If this is your first time to my channel, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you'll get notified whenever content like this comes out in the future, okay? So without any further ado, let's get started. So my journey started out in terms of like my healing journey. I got diagnosed with high blood pressure when I was actually 16 years old in high school. Okay, this is despite the fact that I was an athlete, only had about 5 to 7% body fat, so I was really fit, and I still got diagnosed with high blood pressure. Okay, I lived with high blood pressure for over a decade into my late 20s, and I finally decided to do something about it. After multiple visits to doctors who were telling me not only did I need to take medications, but I needed to take at least 2 to 3 different medications because my blood pressure was commonly around about 160, 170 over 90, 100. Okay, so blood pressure is that top number, which is systolic over diastolic. Systolic is when your heart is contracting. So when you hear that beat, that is the contraction of the heart. Okay, and that number is representing the pressure that is in the heart whenever you're in the blood vessels, whenever your heart is contracting. Okay. All right. And then the bottom number is when your heart is relaxing. There isn't a beat. Okay. And so if that number is higher and you're supposed to be relaxing, again, the pressure in the blood vessels are higher than it should be. Okay. So mine was routinely 170 over 100. Okay. Which is approaching stroke level. Okay. And so I realized that after working in the hospital and seeing people who were now in their early 30s, and I was at the time in my late 20s, who were having heart attacks and strokes, I realized that this was going to be my impending doom at some point. And so I said, you know what? I got to do something about it. And I'll be the first to tell you, healthcare professionals are probably the worst patients. And what I mean by that is I would get my prescriptions and I wouldn't rarely ever take it. Okay. And so I wouldn't take it. And then I wouldn't do anything about changing my lifestyle. So it left me saddled in the same position. So I continued with this sort of back and forth for over a decade. Now, I'll tell you, before we get started into a lot of the things that I did and the recommendations that I give to people, I'll tell you that first, this is a disclaimer. This is not medical advice. This is simply what I did and what I do with people I work with in terms of like giving them things that work for me and that have worked for other people that I work with. So this is not medical advice. This is a holistic approach to living your life such that your body actually heals and rebalances itself. Okay, so this is not medical advice. Okay, so and when I realized, as being a healthcare professional in the hospital, I realized that the vast majority of people who were coming into the hospitals who had heart attacks, who had strokes, many of them were actually on medication when they had the heart attack and they had a stroke. So that also told me that even if I take the medication, like it's helping to reduce my blood pressure, but I still can have a heart attack or a stroke. So that even scared me even more. So that was what made me say, all right, I gotta really change my lifestyle. Okay, so what I decided to do was go on this healing journey, and that healing journey consisted of trial and error. I mean, I tried everything. I tried everything from, changing how I worked out, doing different types of exercises, CrossFit and HIIT training and aerobics training with Billy Blanks, you name it. I tried that. I tried all different types of diets. And I'll tell you, this is why I discovered diets don't work because diets don't change your lifestyle, okay? And so after a lot of trial and error, I finally figured it out. But before I get into what I did, that literally took my blood pressure from 170 over 100 to literally 117 over 80, sometimes some 117, 115 over, 70. Before I share with you what I did with that, let's first dive into a little bit of the statistics behind high blood pressure, because I think it's important to first get informed so you understand what high blood pressure is, because a lot of people do exactly what I did. The doctor tells them that their blood pressure is a little bit high and they brush it off because most of the people in the family have high blood pressure and they see them walking around, no problem. And so in their mind, they're thinking like, well, a little high blood pressure won't kill you. But again, it's the number one risk factor for the number one cause of human death. That's the first thing. The other thing is high blood pressure has a nickname, and that nickname is the silent assassin, okay? Because most people who have high blood pressure don't even know they have high blood pressure. And most people who have a stroke or a heart attack have a stroke or a heart attack without even knowing they have high blood pressure. Okay, so this is why it's so important to first get informed. Okay, so first sort of statistic that is really important to understand is 1 in 4 adults between the ages of 40 and 20, I would say 20 to 44, have high blood pressure. 1 in 4. Okay, that's 1 in 4 adults. And if you start to get into age brackets that are between 40 and 50, and then between 50 and 60, that number goes up exponentially. Okay, so that's really important. If you walk into a room now and the room is filled with people between the ages of 20 and 44, 1 out of 4 people, 25% of the people are going to have high blood pressure, and most aren't going to know it. The other thing that's really important is high blood pressure isn't just this thing you can brush off. Let me give you a few examples of what high blood pressure is doing to you. All right, I'll first start with what should have been telltale signs to me, even at 16 years old, that something was wrong with my blood pressure. I would notice that I would get headaches. Okay, I was noticing that I was getting more fatigued than usual. Okay, I was noticing that I was getting that headache in a particular area of my head as well too. So those are some of the things that were telling me that it was high blood pressure even before I got diagnosed. The other thing that's really important, as I mentioned before, is that high blood pressure isn't just pressure that's high in the body and is not doing anything. Okay, high blood pressure stiffens the blood vessels. It makes the blood vessels more stiff instead of being more elastic and movable. And just think about it. If you had a tire on a car and that tire got very, very stiff, it would at some point crack. Okay, and when it begins to crack, now you lose all the pressure. Okay, you can have a heart attack, you can have a stroke, etc. Okay, all right. The other thing that's really important about having high blood pressure is that it promotes the buildup of plaque in the arteries. Okay, not plaque on the teeth, but plaque in the arteries. Okay, and that plaque can eventually break away from the walls of the arteries and block off that artery or blood vessel, and that will lead to you having a heart attack. Okay, that could potentially even lead to you having a stroke. Okay, so having high blood pressure increases plaque inside of the arteries as well too. And then the other thing is, it again is the leading cause of strokes. It's the leading cause of heart attacks. Okay, so it's not something you can just walk off. The other thing that's really important about high blood pressure, it ruins your kidneys. Okay, because again, when you have high blood pressure, it's not just in the heart, it's everywhere in your body. And particularly in the organs is where it's most dangerous. Think about the kidneys, okay? The kidneys will have high blood pressure in the kidneys, inside of the vessels, inside of the kidneys as well too. And that will lead to the kidneys beginning to break down, which is really important. So high blood pressure ruins the kidneys, which causes you to develop cardiovascular disease. Your kidney, That's the big point that I want to sort of make to you guys, is that everything is connected. Okay, it's not just ruining your heart, it's not just ruining your blood vessels, it's ruining your kidneys, it's ruining your brains. Okay, it's ruining, the flow of blood throughout the entire body. Okay, so it's really important that everything is connected. Okay, so once your kidneys get ruined by the high blood pressure, it's going to affect your heart and cause you to eventually have cardiovascular disease. And as we can see, especially in our community, in the Black and brown community, you can see that kidney disease is going up exponentially every day. We're starting to see dialysis clinics in our neighborhoods, to the same tune of McDonald's. We see just as many dialysis clinics as McDonald's, and that makes sense now, right? When you're eating that type of food, okay, it's going to ruin your kidneys, and we'll talk about why that happens when you're eating that type of food, why it ruins your kidneys and raises your blood pressure in just a moment. The other thing is, high blood pressure, according to the World Health Organization, is also considered the number one contributor, to all causes of mortality. Okay, the number one. If they were to rank what things contribute to mortality or death, high blood pressure is the number one contributor. Okay, so again, that's why it's so important. The other thing this is probably something that most people don't know, but when I found out this statistic, it really changed everything for me. The leading cause of death for a cardiologist, which is a heart doctor, the leading cause of death for a heart doctor is cardiovascular disease. Now imagine that. They go to school for 12, 14 years, residency, like all of these things, and put in all of this work, and they're expert at the heart. And the number one cause of death for a cardiologist, cardiovascular disease. Okay, now that doesn't mean that they don't know anything about the heart, but that definitely means that as a group, as a whole, they don't know much about healing the heart. Okay, so it's really important for us to understand that. And if you look at doctors like Dr. Dean Ornish, who published multiple studies in multiple peer-reviewed journals, very respected journals and publications, he literally has been doing things with the whole foods plant-based diet to heal people of not only high blood pressure, but even congestive heart failure and other cardiovascular diseases. So it's really important we get those statistics out of the way first, and then let's go into some risk factors, things that actually cause, your blood pressure to be high. Okay, so some of those risk factors would be being overweight or obese. So the more adipose tissue you have on the body, the higher your blood pressure. The other thing is a sedentary lifestyle. Okay, the less you move. And the reason why this is so important, because today we move much less than our ancestors. Our ancestors walked to work. Our ancestors, most of the jobs were actually manual labor jobs. And not only that, most of them were manual labor jobs that were outside. Okay. So our ancestors, our great-grandparents, our grandparents were much more better at movement. Okay. And we have a much more sedentary lifestyle compared to our grandparents. I mean, everything has changed in the last 50 years, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But a sedentary lifestyle will increase your blood pressure as well, because life is about movement. I mean, circulating blood through your body is a constant thing. It's happening right now as we speak. And the less you move, the less you circulate. Okay. And that is true because the lower half of our body doesn't have a pump like the top half of our body. Our top half has a heart that is pumping the blood. The bottom half doesn't have a pump. So if you don't move, you don't get that blood flowing back up through the veins. Okay, so it's important to have movement. Okay, other things, the standard American diet. We'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but the standard American diet is 60 to 70% processed foods. And that processing comes with food chemicals. And a large majority of those food chemicals are things like salt. okay? Not the salt you use with the shaker, but they're putting salt in it to preserve it, okay? And most people don't know how to read food labels, so they don't even know how much salt is in it, okay? And most people eat so much processed food, they're not actually adding it all up throughout the day, so they don't know how much salt they're consuming throughout the day as well, too. And we'll dive a little bit deeper than that, because most people think when you have high blood pressure, it's always attached to you having too much salt in your diet. That's not always the case. The other thing is drinking too much alcohol, stress, taking a lot of NSAIDs. NSAIDs are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, okay? These are like things you can buy over the counter. Advil, ibuprofen, Motrin, naproxen. These are often painkillers that people use, and people use them commonly. Like, I know people who use them daily, if not every other day. And these things will raise your blood pressure. Not only raise your blood pressure, but also kill the good bacteria in your gut, which some of that good bacteria is actually there to help monitor your blood pressure, to keep your blood pressure normal. Okay, so that's really important too. Low vitamin D. Low vitamin D, and roughly 70% of African Americans and people of color have low vitamin D, or at least suboptimal levels. Okay, and vitamin D plays a key role in converting an enzyme in the kidneys. Okay, because when you get vitamin D, it hits the skin. It has to have magnesium to convert it there. It then has to go through the liver to be converted. That sunlight, when it hits the skin, goes to the liver to be converted. Then it has to go through the kidneys to be converted. And now you have vitamin D, the active form of vitamin D. Well, if you don't have healthy kidneys, as I mentioned before, now you can't convert this, sunlight into vitamin D, the active form. Okay. So you can see how having low vitamin D and you won't have this enzyme, now you're going to have high blood pressure, because now it's going to start to affect your kidneys as well too. Okay. Dysbiosis. And that's what I just mentioned before. Dysbiosis is having a lot of bad bacteria in the gut and not enough good. Okay. So having dysbiosis in the gut can cause your blood pressure to be high. Also, kidney issues, as I mentioned before, one in three patients in the U.S. Have kidney disease, okay? And that's 1 in 3 African Americans have kidney disease. That's about 33%. So if we got 3 people here, one of them are, who are African American, one of them are gonna have some form of kidney disease. And that is crazy when you think about the fact that African Americans only represent about 12% of the American population, okay? But we represent 33% of kidney disease. Like, that's crazy. So we gotta do something. All right, so let's jump into some things that we need to eliminate. What do we need to eliminate? All right, you gotta eliminate things that are causing stimulation to the body. Things like caffeine, coffee, okay? That will increase your heart rate, which will increase your blood pressure. So eliminate, and not only that, coffee will also be dehydrating to you. And dehydration will dehydrate the kidneys, put more pressure on the kidneys, increase the blood pressure in the body. Okay, so getting rid of dehydrating and stimulating beverages like coffee and caffeinated, drinks like energy drinks. Okay, getting rid of processed foods. As I mentioned before, processed foods are relatively a new thing. They didn't really come into play until like the 1950s, after World War II, when, they were using scientists to create processed foods for the soldiers who were fighting, because one of the big things about wars that they knew was that a lot of the soldiers died not from, being shot, stabbed, or killed. They were dying as a result of malnutrition. Okay, so they created a lot of these processed foods so that when they dropped them, they would last long enough. Okay, and then they sold that or gave that information to the food industry, and then you have this big boom of processed foods. But ever since that time, the 1950s, you have seen an increase in cardiovascular disease. That's when you saw cardiovascular disease become the #1 cause of death in the US, and then later on become the #1 cause of death for human beings in general around the world. Okay, and you can go back during that time and you'll see that the American president Dwight Eisenhower has a heart attack, and then now they're trying to figure out what is going on with heart disease and cardiovascular disease because it was a new thing. It wasn't this thing that was common as it is today. Okay, so getting rid of processed foods. Okay, a lot of these man-made foods is a big thing. Okay, eating more whole foods, foods that have one ingredients, an avocado, kale, etc. Getting rid of those NSAIDs that I talked about before, the Motrin, the Advil, naproxen, etc. Those things raise your blood pressure, and using some more natural options, or correcting the issue. Okay, stress, managing stress. Now that you can't completely eliminate stress, but you can manage stress because stress does increase your blood pressure. Also, removing white flour and refined carbohydrates. The reason why this one is so important is because white flour, refined carbohydrates increase insulin in the body. Okay, and this now when people think about insulin, they think about diabetes. They don't think about high blood pressure. But here's why this is important. Increases in insulin will increase blood pressure. Why is that? Because an increase in insulin causes renal sodium to be reabsorbed. So you absorb more of that sodium, salt, okay? You absorb more of that salt back into the body, okay? So that's the first thing. The other thing is when you increase insulin, it will activate your sympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight nervous system in your body, making you more jittery, more active, okay? You want to be chill. Okay, but if you eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, a lot of white flour, it's going to increase your insulin, which is going to stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, make you more excited. Okay, the other thing is it alters the membrane of the cell so that when you're having this exchange of ions, which we'll talk about, when I say ions, I'm talking about things like potassium and sodium, it will disrupt the flow of those things. And here's why that's so important, because in every cell in the body, we have a sodium potassium pump. That sodium potassium pump, it does a lot for our blood pressure. And what I mean by that is this. That sodium potassium pump will pump 3 sodium out of the cell, and it will pump 2 potassium into the cell. Okay? Now here's why that's so important. Potassium relaxes the blood vessels, okay? So when you have this disruption of that sodium ion, transport system, now you're gonna have a disruption between sodium and potassium. Sodium will cause you to retain fluid. Think of it like a balloon. The more and more water you put in the balloon, it creates more and more pressure to the point that the balloon will pop if you add too much water. Okay, so more sodium, more salt. You're gonna cause more water to stay in the body. The more water, you're increasing the pressure. Eventually that pressure will cause a pop, which could be an aneurysm, which could be a stroke, which could be a heart attack. Okay, really, really important. Now I'm gonna talk to you about the 10 foods you need to get rid of if you either have high blood pressure or you have pre-hypertension, which is right before high blood pressure, but you're right there. It's gonna happen. Okay, so here's the 10 foods that you most definitely need to get rid of. Canned foods. All canned foods are going to have a lot of salt. Salt is there to preserve the food. It preserves the food, makes the food last longer, but it doesn't preserve you. So get rid of all canned foods, okay? Number 2, processed and deli meats. Processed and deli meats. Processed and deli meats are gonna be high in nitrates, which we know cause cancer, but it's also going to be very high in sodium, okay? Processed and deli meats are going to cause an increase in sodium, thereby increase in high blood pressure, even red meats as well too. Number 3, stay away from microwave foods. Again, they're going to always put a ton of salt in microwave foods. So you want to start making your own food, or if you're going to buy food that is cooked, but not in a fast fashion. That is not out of a box, a bag, a can, or jar. Okay, you want to eat whole foods. Okay, so stay away from microwave foods. Number 4, fried foods. Stay away from fried foods. They're going to cause inflammation inside of the lining of the blood vessels. Number 5, condiments. Stay away from them, eliminate them as much as possible, or get healthier versions of them that don't have all the sodium and the sugar in it, okay? Again, sodium isn't the only thing. It's also sugar, as I talked about with the refined carbohydrates and the white flour. Number 6, fast foods. You eat fast, you're gonna die slow, okay? And as you can see, a lot of people, who eat a lot of fast foods end up getting hypertension, then they get high cholesterol, then they get diabetes, okay? Then they get heart disease. I mean, the list just keeps growing. It's just a slow but sure death, okay? So you eat fast, you're gonna die slow, okay? So don't eat fast, eat slow, okay? Eating slow is like eating a salad. I mean, eating a prepared food. Food you gotta make takes time. You go get fast food, they cook it in 5 minutes, okay? Number 7 is salted nuts. Be careful of the salted nuts because that type of salt, which is the same kind of salt you're gonna see in a salt shaker, that type of salt is going to increase the sodium in you. And what you really love about the nuts is probably the sodium. That's what's keeping you addicted to it. It's the same thing with McDonald's fries. Eating those fries, the reason why you love the fries is really because the amount of salt that's in it, okay? Number 8, I'm gonna say is canned soups and broths. Start checking the labels. We're gonna talk about this in a second, but start checking the labels. You'll see how much salt is in there. The daily recommendation for salt is less than 1,500 milligrams, I believe, for the American Heart Association. And in one of these cans, you probably can get that one daily amount, okay? Because you don't understand how to read it. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Pickles, man, one pickle. I mean, just one pickle. A lot of times you look at that pickle and you think, well, it's a pickle. It's a cucumber that has been sitting in vinegar, but like there's a lot of salt in it. And that pickle will raise your blood pressure without you even knowing it. You're thinking you're eating something that is a vegetable, but like there's a ton of salt in it. And number 10, alcohol. Alcohol will raise your blood pressure as well too. So that's something. And a bonus for today is hot sauce. For those of you who like to put the sauce on there, you like your stuff a little bit saucy. Hot sauce, 1 teaspoon, almost 200 milligrams of salt. Okay, that's just 1 teaspoon, okay? All right, so let's get into some solutions and we're gonna wrap it up for today and we're gonna go through these pretty quickly. 1, read your labels, okay? Start reading your labels, but even most importantly, stop as much as possible, stop buying things in box, bag, cans, jars, etc. Because when you get whole foods in the form of an avocado, in the form of a coconut, when you're eating things that are one ingredient, those things, you don't have to worry about the salt content in it. You don't have to worry about the food chemicals in it. It only has what nature gave to it, okay? But if you're gonna buy things inside of box, bag, cans, and jars, make sure you read the food label because what you're gonna see is the amount of sodium. And remember what I said, you're supposed to consume less than 1,500 milligrams a day of sodium. But what you'll see it'll say 200 milligrams of sodium. But what you don't realize is that one container has 5 servings, which means that if it has 200 milligrams, it means that you now have consumed 1,000 milligrams. And that's just one thing. We're not going to talk about all the other foods you consume. So read your labels. Number 2, eat foods that are high in potassium. Remember what I said, foods that are high in potassium. The good thing about those foods is potassium lowers the blood pressure because it relaxes the blood vessels. Okay, so foods that are high in potassium, that are not bananas, okay? Avocado. An avocado has about 700 milligrams in one avocado, 700 milligrams of potassium, okay? Dried apricots, okay, are good too. Coconut water, good too. 1 cup of coconut water has 600 milligrams of potassium. So you have some coconut water, 1 cup of coconut water, you have some avocado, you're almost there, all right? Watermelon, okay? 2 wedges of watermelon, you'll get a sufficient amount of potassium as well too. Butternut squash is also a good one as well too. So get your potassium from whole foods, as I just mentioned, okay? Not the supermarket, but whole foods, okay? Number 3, adopt the whole foods plant-based lifestyle. I'm telling you what I did on my journey. So I started eating a lot of high potassium foods. I started reading my labels. I adopted a whole foods plant-based lifestyle. I said, I'm gonna not just eat vegan, I'm gonna eat whole foods, not vegan junk food, whole foods for 60 days. That's what I told myself, okay? I did it for 60 days, okay? And I'll tell you what my blood pressure changed to. I started doing a lot of exercise twice a day. And most of the exercise I did at home or in my neighborhood. Okay, so when I say exercise, I mean movement. You can do jumping jacks at home. You can do push-ups at home. You can do lunges at home. You can sit down and up and down in a chair at home. I did a lot of movement. And whenever I did like aerobic activity, like running or jogging or walking, I did it within my target heart rate, okay? Within my target heart rate, which really helps, by the way. Number 5, meditation. Because again, high blood pressure is really an issue of stress in the body, okay? It's pressure, okay? So I did the meditation 2 to 3 times a day because meditation is known to soothe the nervous system, particularly the sympathetic nervous system that I talked about earlier, okay? Number 6, stay super hydrated. I was drinking half my body weight in ounces, okay? So I weigh about 215, okay? I'm about 6'2", so I drink half my body weight in ounces. So I was drinking somewhere around 4 liters a day of water, okay? Coconut water, green juices, things of that nature, okay? So stay super hydrated. The more hydration you have, the more you're gonna keep the kidneys healthy, okay? And the last thing, and probably the most important thing that I did, was cleansing and detoxification to get all of that salt that I have been consuming since a child. All that salt from the processed foods, because most of the things that I grew up on came in a box, bag, can, jar, and they're preserved by salt, they're preserved by food chemicals, okay? So doing cleansing, detoxification. This is where I created my detox. So for those of you who know, I have a 14-day and 28-day detox, full body detox. It gets rid of yeast, parasites, gets rid of all the waste in the guts and a lot of the food chemicals, heavy metals, mucus, things of that nature. I created my detox during this time, and my blood pressure went literally from 170 over 100 on average to around about 117, 115 over like 70 to 80. Okay, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I know it was a little long today, but I had a lot to share in a very small amount of time. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it gave you a lot of aha moments. And I hope something on here will help you transform your health. Again, if you love the content, continue to follow, share. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.